Hi, this is Mr. Evans, and this video is going to look at Kaplan and Norton's balanced scorecard method. So we've been considering different ways in which we can analyse the internal position of a business to assess strengths and weaknesses. This is part of our conducting our SWOT analysis, which in turn is part of the strategic planning process, where we're attempting to put together plans that will allow us to achieve our objectives. So we're right at the bottom here, the value of different measures of assessing businesses' performance. So we've talked about using the financial statements, we've talked about using human resource, operations, marketing figures. There's a couple of models as well that we can also consider, and one of them is the Kaplan and Norton's balanced scorecard. It came around in the 1990s when businesses were starting to pay more attention to issues of corporate social responsibility. In other words, not just considering profit, but also trying to think of the wider impact that a business has on society. So the balanced scorecard is a system that's used to analyse both financial and non-financial performance of a business from a range of different stakeholder perspectives. So the traditional view of business is that they are run, for the benefit essentially of the shareholders. The shareholders are the people who put the money in, they've invested in the business. The aim of the business is to satisfy customers, to make money, to give back to the shareholders. This balanced scorecard takes a bit more of a holistic view of a business and a stakeholder perspective. So not just shareholders, although they are important, but also other stakeholders involved in the business. So this is what the balanced scorecard looks like, a very simple picture. In the middle, we've got the business's vision and strategy, and then a range of different areas in which we can judge a business's performance in terms of financial performance, like return on capital employed, profitability, internal business practices, so how effective the business is at, say, meeting customer orders on time, labour productivity, chasing up debts, the receivables, the payables days. These would all be in internal business practices. Learning and growth is about, is the business developing for the future and reinvesting for the future? And finally, the impact on the customer. So under each of those categories, and I'll go into them in a bit more depth in a minute, but for each category, what would you do? Number one, you'd want to assess your strengths and weaknesses in that area. What are our strengths in finance? What are we good at with our internal business practices? What do we need? What are our weaknesses with our customers? We're then going to set some smart objectives under each of the headings that will contribute to achieving the organisation's purpose. So we've got these 4 different areas. We're going to set objectives in each area, targets to try and meet to help us achieve our organisation's purpose. We then set our strategy to achieve the objectives, and we review the progress made against targets and begin the process again. Now, it's called a balanced scorecard, so it should be worth bearing in mind. Obviously, if we set the intention of, say, increasing return on capital employed, increasing profits for shareholders, that may well have an impact on the learning and growth element of the scorecard. If we're taking money out of the business to give to shareholders, we've got less to reinvest in the business. So the point is that we should be taking a holistic view. Right, if we set this objective for our shareholders, how's that going to affect our customers over here or our employees over here? And we're trying to create a balance, a strategy that's going to allow us as best we can to satisfy each of those stakeholders. So on the different measures, so underneath financial measures, who are the stakeholders we're considering? Well, we're thinking about shareholders. We might measure gross profit margin, operating profit margin, return on capital employed, gearing, etc. An example of an objective would be to reduce the cost of sales, our variable cost, by 15%. Well, how could we do that? We come up with a strategy. Maybe we'll try and pay suppliers upon delivery and negotiate a reduction in our raw material costs because we're not buying stuff on credit. So that might be a way of achieving our objective. In terms of internal business practices, so this is looking inside the business and seeing how effective the business is being managed. Which stakeholders are we looking at? We're looking predominantly at employees and managers. We might consider labour productivity, inventory turnover, payables days, lead time, i.e. the difference between when a customer orders and when that order is delivered. All sorts of measures. This is literally just scratching the surface, the tip of the iceberg. There's so many things that we might look at in terms of this. What would be an example objective? Well, increase labour productivity by 10%. And how do we go about doing that? Well, over the course of the year, all the warehouse employees are to receive 20 hours of off-the-job training to make them more effective and increase their productivity. Underneath the customer heading of the scorecard, we would obviously consider our customers. They're the main stakeholders. What might we measure? Customer satisfaction, brand awareness, our market share. We might look at the quality of our product. An example objective would be to increase customer satisfaction as measured by surveys to 99%. And we could introduce total quality management to reduce the number of faulty products. Finally, learning and growth is the final element of the scorecard. Well, who does that consider? Well, a whole load of people: management, shareholders, the local, the national community, employees, customers, etc. This is about essentially ensuring the business. I see this one as a long-term kind of measure of performance. We'd want to look at labour retention. Are our staff happy? Percentage of turnover invested in market research, finding out about customers. What about research and design? Are we investing in in new products for the future? We might look at our product portfolio, etc. An example objective under here would be to produce a prototype design of a new product over the course of the next year and get it tested. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, we'll invest 10 million in research and design. Again, it's worth noting that, this strategy here is going to have an effect on the other areas. It's going to have an effect on our customers because we need to do some research and find out what they want. It's going to affect our internal business processes because we'll be investing more money in R&D, which might take people away from actually producing our current products. And obviously, if we're investing 10 million in research and design, there's less money there for shareholders. So it's important when we're using the balanced scorecard that we're aware that each of these areas impact on each other. So what are the advantages of using this system? Well, number one, it should encourage a systematic approach to reviewing performance and creating strategy. It's a very logical series of steps we're going through. We take our area, we assess our strengths and weaknesses, we set objectives, we set our strategy, then we review. It's based on both quantitative and qualitative data. When we're just looking at for example, the financial ratios, we're only looking at quantitative data. This takes into account qualitative data as well. It encourages a range of perspectives to be considered, which should benefit the business. You're considering what your employees think, which might increase their motivation. You're trying to think of your customers, which should increase their satisfaction. It encourages a long-term approach to decision making, especially if we're considering learning and growth. And balance comes from considering the impact of one strategy across a range of performance measures. They're the good things about the balanced scorecard. The disadvantages of the balanced scorecard, well, it's going to be time consuming and expensive to complete. You're going to have to speak to a lot of different people. It's quite complex to do, and it's particularly complex to balance needs of one stakeholder against another. Are the shareholders going to be thrilled about you investing £10 million in research and development if they're not going to get a return for another 5 years from that product? Okay, so there can be conflict as a result. Right, we're considering 4 different areas, and we might have 3 or 4 different objectives under each one. It's going to be very difficult to ensure that those targets aren't confusing or conflict with each other. Maybe employees won't know exactly which target they should be following. Maybe they're affected by being asked to both increase profitability and increase customer satisfaction and maybe increasing customer satisfaction will require them to give customers a discount or things like that, and it may be difficult, cause conflict, confusion. And again, this is going to require several strategies being implemented at the same time. So it's going to increase complexity and the challenge of managing, trying to achieve several objectives at the same time. Okay, but overall, it's a system that should be beneficial in that it moves businesses away from a focus on solely shareholders to a more holistic focus on a greater range of stakeholders.